Hello, this is Trinity Place in Geneva, New York. My name is Cameron Miller, and this is a reflection on the last Sunday of Epiphany. Last Sunday of Epiphany. Hopefully, there have been some epiphanies along the way. But I want to begin by saying that many of us long thought that a war in Europe was something relegated to history. But today, in the headlines, on our minds and our prayers, it's a reality. The bishop of the Episcopal Church in Europe, Mark Eddington, reminded those in his diocese, which is congregations spread across the continent rather than in just one nation, that the place where war lives is in the human heart. As we pray for peace, I encourage us to do the work of eradicating war in our hearts. Now I invite our focus to be present here in this moment. I say that, but I was not where I should have been or needed to be when I was writing this sermon. And here's what I mean. We have 3 readings today, but I got stuck on the verses in the book of Exodus that appear actually just before the ones we actually read today. But honestly, that's only half true. What I was really enthralled and taken up with was the excerpt from Annie Dillard that I hovered over, wondering if I could preach on that instead of on Luke. But then, because of Annie Dillard, I got curious about Moses. Suddenly I wanted to reread in Exodus where God sticks Moses into the little crack in the rock. It's at the end of chapter 33, which is right before the story we read today. But before I get into that one, the readings from Exodus and Luke that are actually appointed for today both have Moses and Jesus magically shining faces. That's weird and unusual, right? It can't be an accident, can it, that the architects of the Revised Common Lectionary put these 2 readings as bookends on the same day. So what's with the shining faces? Now, I have preached on these stories so many dang times, and you know by now that Luke is telling this story to proclaim that Jesus belongs in the pantheon of spiritual superheroes right along with Moses and Elijah. And that's the headline. Jesus hanging out on the clouds talking to Moses and Elijah. Now, Christians have trouble playing nice with others, so it wasn't enough for the church to celebrate the Big 3 event. It had to make the Transfiguration story all about Jesus and how he's greater than anybody else. But I dare say that wasn't the original intent of Luke's story. And all that's fine and dandy if we want to remain in the clouds talking about theology and trading intellectual nuggets of theology with one another. But I don't want to stay there. I want to bring it down from the mountaintop, and I want to talk to you about you and me and where we live without the glow, without the magic, without the light show. Annie Dillard and my curiosity helped me do that. So here's this piece of the Exodus story that appears just before the one we read today. This is chapter 33 of Exodus, starting at verse 18. Moses said to God, "Show me your glory, I pray." And God said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you my name. But," God said, "you cannot see my face, for no one shall see my face and live." And the Lord continued, "See, there's a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory passes, I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and I will cover your face with my hand until I pass by. And then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back. But my face shall not be seen. That's a great story. So there we are, right in the middle of Annie Dillard, stalking the gaps, cleft in the rock. The gaps are the cleft in the rock, she says, where you cower to see the back parts of God. They are the fissures between mountains and cells the winds lance through, the icy narrowing fjords splitting the cliffs of mystery. It is such a weird little story in Exodus about the relationship between God and Moses, but we hardly ever talk about it. Because you see, Moses, being Moses, pesters God for access. And to be honest, Moses agitates, it really appears, for control in their relationship. Moses wants to control God, as odd as that sounds. It's as if Moses wants to be God's promoter or manager. And Moses wants to see God's face, because it's not until we look into someone's face, into their eyes, that we really begin to sense that we know them. To see God's face would be to know God's essence. And to be with God in the same place at one and the same time would be to know God in an utterly new way. This is like wanting to know what it's like to swim in molten lava. You can do it, but then you'll be dead. God says, no. But then he throws Moses a bone. Because I like you, God might have said, here's what I'll do. I'll squeeze you into the cleft of the rock real tight, facing away from me. And then I will cover your eyes as I pass by and let you know I'm passing. Once I pass, and only then, you can look. You will be able to see where I have just been. Moses wants more. But because he's a human, that's the best he can hope for and live. So Moses was allowed to see where God had just been as God recedes into the distance. He could look where God was, but not where God is. Because if he were with God in the same time and place in real time, he would die. And in fact, to be even as close as to where God was just a minute ago was enough to alter Moses' face forever. From then on, Moses' face glowed. Now the message is that we don't get to be with God in the same time and the same place either. We don't get to have God look us in the eye or our looking God in the eye and tell us what we most want to hear. We don't get anything like that. And we do not promise, and we are never promised such rare delights. To look upon God is to die. So, message number one for you and me, we don't get to see or know God, period. We don't get to see or know God, okay? Nothing. The part does not get to know the whole. And as far as being a part of God, we are but a speck, an infinitesimal bacteria riding on a cell on top of a dust mite within the cosmos that is God. Like Moses, we agitate for more and want to be in control of that relationship, but we don't get what we want. Even so, and point number 2, our smallness doesn't mean that we're stuck hiding in the cleft. Instead, we can storm the gaps. Like Annie Dillard says, there's always a temptation to diddle around in a contemplative life, making itsy-bitsy statues. But I won't have it, she says. The world is wilder than that, in all directions, more dangerous and bitter, more extravagant and bright. We're making hay when we should be making whoopee. We're raising tomatoes when we should be raising Cain or Lazarus. And so here is a fitting end to Epiphany and to this sermon. Here is how we can storm the gaps. We have this covenant, the one that we take hold of in baptism, and that we claim is the shape of our spiritual practice. There is nothing itsy-bitsy or diddling about it. If we are actively engaged in this covenant, even if only one promise at a time, it will get us rattled. It will get us in trouble, good trouble. It will open the dangerous dimensions of the world all around us. Now, we have been reminding ourselves here at Trinity Place and through these sermons about these promises all through Epiphany. So no one should be shocked when we get pushed out of the itsy-bitsy into the world, into the wind fiercely howling between the gaps. Here's what you and I say that we will do. Here are the promises of our spiritual practice. You tell me if they're itsy-bitsy. First, we promise to mine the wisdom and stay within the community of worship that will make us cry. This wisdom, this community, will cause us to feel one another's pain and to voice our own and to then sing about it as well as to eat the bread of wine and affliction. We promise to stay connected, which is turbulence and trouble enough for anyone. There's nothing itsy-bitsy at all in that promise. Promise number 1, to stay connected and to continue to mine the wisdom that is in our community. We promise, number 2, that we will persevere in confronting our demons. That we will actually stalk the gaps of our own shadow and name the problem characters that we find there. We say that we will recognize and name the things we do and the tendencies we have that we're not proud of and that we know cause problems for others. And then having done that, we will turn around and be different. We say that. And then we promise to do it. And that in itself is a wild promise. Number 3, we promise in our baptismal covenant that our lives will actually become the wisdom, the love, and the hope that Jesus promised. Really, we say that. It is in the promise we make that by word and example, we will proclaim the divinity that animated the human being known as Jesus. And that divinity will be in us because we will embody that hope and that love and that wisdom. There's no diddling around in that promise. After we have promised that our lives will embody divinity, we then promise that we will look for and serve divinity in all people, including the radical act of loving our neighbor as ourselves. I don't think we have any idea just how dangerous that promise is. And then finally, in our stalking the gaps and putting ourselves in hazardous situations of trying to be where God has just been, we promise to strive for justice in a world and in an economy that bleeds injustice. And we promise to strive for peace in a world that is at war. And most poignant of all, we promise to respect the dignity of every human being. We promise these things as if they're just one more thing we will do today, along with the grocery shopping and emailing the kids. Well, here's what I know. I know that Moses couldn't look on the face of God, and that we can't either. In fact, the best we can do is see where God has just been, where God just was, whether it was 1,000 years ago or 20 seconds. We're always working with less information than what we want to know, and with a God that is less knowable than we want or hope for. But that doesn't handicap us from stalking the gaps and resisting the temptation to live itsy-bitsy little lives that are measurable and safe. We have promises to make and we have promises to keep. And they're not itsy-bitsy at all. So I invite us with those promises to keep stalking the gaps. Peace be to you, and peace be with you.